Chapter 6: Recognizing Visual Words. Basic Methods and Findings. Visual words recognition research employs various methods to understand how we process written words. Number 1. Brain imaging. This method uses techniques like fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging or EEG, electroencephalography, to measure brain activity while participants read words. It helps identify brain regions involved in different stages of word processing. For example, researchers might use fMRI to observe which areas of the brain are active when people read words with different levels of frequency. Number 2. Examining eye movement. Eye tracking device record eye movements as participants read text. This reveals how people visually scan words, including fixation where they looked, and saccade rapid eye movement between fixation. For example, researchers might analyze eye movement to see how long people fixate on words with different spelling. Number 3. Measuring, naming, lexical decision, and categorization. These behavioral measures involve recording how quickly participants respond to tasks related to the word processing. Naming. Participants say the word aloud as quickly as possible. Lexical decision. Participants decide whether a string of letters is a real word or not. Categorization. Participants categorize words into different groups. For example, researchers might measure naming times to see how quickly people can name words with different level of familiarity. This method provides complementary insight into the complex processes involved in visual words recognition. Brain imaging reveals neural activity, eye movements, tracking visual attention, and behavioral measures assess the speed and accuracy of word processing. Eye movement. Eye movement research has proven invaluable for understanding how we read, both at the level of individual words and large text units. Word recognition. By tracking eye movement, research can pinpoint where people fixate on words and for how long. This reveals how quickly and easily words are recognized. For example, researchers have found that we fixate longer on unfamiliar words or words with unusual spelling, suggesting they require more processing time. In essence, eye movement provides a window into the real-time cognitive process involved in reading. They allow us to observe how our eyes move in response to the challenges and complexities of the written language. Next, different techniques available for investigating eye movement. First, the limbus tracking. This is technique for tracking eye movement. It involves tracking the edge of the cornea, the outer layer of the eye, which is called the limbus. For example, a limbus tracking device might use infrared light to detect the limbus and calculate eye position. Let's watch a short clip for more explanation.
Are talking about the term limbus. The limbus of an artificial eye is the junction between the sclera and the iris. This line, and on the ocular octopus, it is a very harsh line. Some limbuses are very blendy, blurry, couple examples. Other times, they're very harsh. Sometimes it'll be blendy blurry on one side and harsh on the other side. And that's why it's important that we find out what kind of limbus you have while we're painting your artificial eye so it looks just as realistic as possible. And that's today's Fun Fact Friday on the limbus.
Next is the Purkinje image. This is not a technique for tracking eye movement, but rather a phenomenon. The Purkinje image is a reflection of light of the eye's internal structures, including the cornea and the lens. It can be used to study the shape and movement of the eye. For example, researchers might study changes in the Purkinje image for analysis, how the eye's focus changes during the accommodation, adjusting for near or far version. Next is the saccades. Saccades are the rapid ballistic movement our eyes makes to shift our gaze from one point to another. They are the primary way we can scan text during reading. For example, when reading a sentence, our eyes make a series of saccades jumping from one word to the next.
Let's talk about eye movements. When we gaze around a room, our eyes are unable to move smoothly. We're constantly searching for a point of fixation. This results in eye movements called saccades. The only way our eyes can move smoothly is if we're focusing on a moving object, like a car going by, or a waiter carrying a tray of food that we desperately hope is ours. This is called smooth pursuit movement. The vestibulo-ocular reflex is what allows you to keep a single point of fixation while moving your head back and forth. Like when you say to yourself, "Why am I on eyeball TikTok? Please, algorithm, for the love of God, take me away from here."
What is fovea? The fovea is a tiny pit located in the center of the retina, the light-sensitive layer at the back of the eye. It's the area of the retina which the highest concentration of cones, the photoreceptor cells, responsible for color visions and sharp details. Sharpest version. Because of its high cone density, the fovea provides our sharpest and most detailed vision. When we look directly at something, we are aiming the fovea at it. For example, reading a book. When you read a book, you're constantly moving your eyes so that the words you are focusing on fall on your fovea. This is why you can't read a whole page at once. You need to move your eyes to bring each word into focus. Looking at a painting, when you admire a painting, you might move your eyes across the canvas, focusing your fovea on specific details that catch your attention.
Fovea is a small depression in the retina, located at the center of the macula. This small section makes up less than 1% of the retinal size, but comprises over 50% of the visual cortex in the brain. The fovea provides the highest visual acuity for central field of vision, which is due to the distribution of cones within it. The fovea only contains cones, and these color cones allow the eye to create sharp, clear images. Damage to the macula can result in a loss of central vision. This destruction can result in a disease known as macular degeneration. Although there isn't any known cure for this disease, there are some treatments that may delay its progression. For more
Now, I'll continue our report by delving into how the recognition of visual words relates to both second language acquisition and the broader field of word recognition. I'm Dayan Baywong, and I'll be leading this discussion on how these concepts interconnect and impact our understanding of language learning and reading processes. is second language acquisition? A field of study that investigates how people learn languages beyond their first language, particularly during late childhood, adolescence, or adulthood. It encompasses the acquisition of new linguistic systems, communicative functions, and cultural knowledge. Second language acquisition studies how people learn languages beyond their native language, and this field explores various methods of language learning, including formal education, self study, or immersion experiences. It also looks at how learners develop essential language skills, including speaking, listening, reading, and writing, and also how they adapt to the cultural aspects associated with the new language. Word recognition refers to the cognitive process by which individuals identify and understand written words. It involves the ability to detect and interpret words quickly and accurately when reading. Word recognition is a crucial cognitive skill that allows us to identify and understand written words effortlessly. When we read, word recognition helps us to quickly and accurately spot words on the page and grasp their meanings. Wherein this process is essential for fluent reading as it enables us to make sense of text and follow along with the content smoothly. Without efficient word recognition, reading would be slow and challenging. Word recognition is influenced by several factors. It's easier when words are familiar, context is clear, pronunciation is precise, and visual cues are clear, such as well spaced text and familiar fonts. Tools like predictive text also help by suggesting or correcting words. Recognition becomes harder with unfamiliar words, unclear context, varied accents, background noise, mispronunciations, complex vocabulary, and poor visual presentation. Understanding these factors can improve both learning and communication. There are several factors that affect word recognition, influencing how quickly and accurately we identify and understand written words. These factors can either facilitate or hinder our reading and comprehension abilities. This exploration will delve into the key elements that impact word recognition, examining how they contribute to both ease and difficulty in this crucial cognitive process. Stimulus degradation: the physical appearance of a stimulus on cognitive processing, particularly in the context of word recognition. In the context of word recognition, this often involves manipulating the visual presentation of words to make them less clear or more difficult to process, such as blurred letters, low contrast, and unusual angles. Interference: when other stimuli presented either before or after the target word disrupt the recognition process. This can take two main forms. Backwards masking: presenting another stimulus immediately after the target interferes with the recognition process. The second stimulus, called the mask. It is a technique used to study how quickly and accurately we can recognize a stimulus, like a word, when it is immediately followed by another stimulus called the mask that interfere with the recognition of the first one. There are two main types of backwards masking. Energy masks operate on the visual feature detection level by causing a visual feature shortage and making feature identification difficult. This involves presenting a visual stimulus like a word or image immediately after the target word. The mask can blur or obscure the target, making it harder to recognize, such as a burst of light or random dots that disrupts visual feature detection. Feature masks cause interference at the letter level and limit the time available for processing. This involves presenting a sound or speech immediately after the target word. The mask sound can disrupt the processing of the target word, making it difficult to understand or recall. In both types, the mask essentially covers up or confuses the target stimulus, revealing how quickly and effectively we process and recognize information before it gets masked. Letter delay is a specific type of interference used in experiments to study word recognition by delaying the appearance of the first one or two letters. Researchers can investigate how this delay affects the ability to recognize and process the word. The goal is to see how important those initial letters are for recognizing the word correctly. This method helps researchers understand the role of the initial letters in word recognition and how delays or interruptions can impact our ability to read and understand text quickly. Each factor impacts our ability to process language in different ways. Words that we encounter often, are familiar with, and learned at an earlier age that is typically recognized more rapidly and accurately. Frequency. Frequency of a word or how often it is encountered in language is a significant factor in recognition. This refers to how often a word appears in the language we encounter. Words that are used frequently in spoken and written contexts are recognized more quickly and easily. For example, everyday words like phone and computer are more familiar and thus recognized faster than less common words like ephemeral or bamfazle, which we encounter less often. Familiarity, a broader concept that encompasses the individual's personal experience with a word. This factor relates to how well we know a word based on our personal experiences and exposure. Words that we use often or that are common in our specific environment are more familiar and thus easier to recognize. For instance, a native English speaker might quickly recognize and process common English words like breakfast and email, while someone learning English as a second language might find these words less familiar and take longer to recognize them. Age of acquisition, the age at which it was first learned, is also a significant predictor of recognition speed and accuracy. This effect is observed across a range of tasks, including object naming, word naming, and lexical decision. This is the age at which we first learn a word. Words learned earlier in life are generally recognized more quickly and accurately than words learned later. For example, children often learn simple words like dog and cat early on, so these words are processed more quickly. In contrast, more complex terms like trigonometry or philanthropy, which are learned later in life, may take some more time to recognize due to less frequent use and later acquisition. Word length influence recognition, particularly when other factors are controlled. The length of a word can affect how quickly and easily we recognize it, such as short words like cat are generally recognized faster than longer words like extraordinary. This is because longer words take more time to process, especially when other factors like familiarity and frequency are controlled. Neighborhood effects. This refers to the influence of how many words can be created by changing one letter of a target word. For the word mine, the neighborhood includes words like pine, line, and main. Words with many similar neighbors can be processed differently compared to words with fewer neighbors. For instance, mine might be recognized more quickly because there are several familiar words that are closely related to it. Repetition priming. This is a technique where repeating a word helps in recognizing it more easily. If you see the word apple multiple times, you will recognize apple more quickly the next time you see it. This repeated exposure helps your brain become more efficient at identifying the word. Form based priming, known as orthographic priming, refers to the phenomenon where the recognition of a word is facilitated by the prior presentation of a word that shares similar physical features. This occurs when recognizing a word is made easier because it looks similar to another word that was shown previously. Like if we first see the word cart and then the word car, the recognition of car is facilitated because it shares similar letters with heart, the visual similarity helps in quicker recognition.
Semantic priming. This is when identifying a word is made easier if it comes after another word that is related in meaning. If you see the word doctor right after the word nurse, you are likely to recognize doctor faster because nurse and doctor are related in meaning. This connection helps your brain process the word more quickly.
Each of these factors plays a role in how we read and understand written text, affecting the speed and accuracy of word recognition. When studying how we recognize words, the results can vary depending on the type of task used in the experiments. Here's why. Experiments on word recognition are difficult to interpret because different experimental tasks sometimes give different results. When using lexical decision tasks, participants decide whether a string of letters is a real word or a non-word. It measures both the speed and accuracy of word recognition, but it also includes additional processes like decision making and response preparation. Naming task. Participants read a word out loud. It focuses on word recognition as well as the production of speech, which involves additional processes like pronunciation and articulation. Measurement task effect. Participants listen to speech over headphones while simultaneously looking at the computer screen to perform a lexical decision test to visually presented words. All of these tasks involve different processes that can yield different results. For instance, participants might use different strategies in lexical decision tasks compared to naming tasks. They might rely on visual similarity or meaning in one task but focus on pronunciation in another. In summary, different tasks used to study word recognition can lead to different outcomes because each task involves additional processes beyond just recognizing words. This makes interpreting results complex, as what we are measuring is not purely word recognition but also the effects of the task itself on recognition performance.
So I'll continue our report. I am Kaya Olag and my topic is all about meaning-based visual-based recognition. We have seen that semantic priming is one of the most robust effects on word recognitions. Although there are different types of semantic priming. Semantic priming. Semantic priming refers to the facilitation of a faster response to a target due to prior exposure to a stimulus that is related in meaning. Semantic priming is a phenomenon where your brain is faster at processing a word or concept if you've recently been exposed to a related word or concept. Imagine this. You see the word doctor and then are asked to identify the word nurse. You likely recognize nurse faster than if you haven't seen doctor first. This is because doctor and nurse are semantically related. They share a common meaning in the context of healthcare. Type of semantic priming. One obvious question is whether all types of semantic relations are equally successful in inducing priming. The closer the meanings of the two words, the larger the size of the priming effect observed. We can also distinguish between associative priming and non-associative semantic priming. So what is associative priming? Associative priming is a type of priming that occurs when exposure to a stimulus influences the processing of a related stimulus, even if the two stimuli are not semantically related. Example of associative priming is bell leads to hop but not vice versa. Hence, bell facilitates hop but hop does not facilitate bell. So some words are produced as associated of words that are not related in meaning. Priming by associate is called associative priming. The two associate might or might not also be semantically related. Non-associative semantically related words are those that still have a relation in terms of meaning to the target, that are not produced as associates. Consider the words dance and skate. They are clearly related in meaning, but skate is rarely produced as an associative of dance. Bread and cake are an example of another pair of semantically related but unassociated words. So non-associative words is the priming by words that are semantically but not associatively related is called non-associative semantic. Does sentence context affect visual word recognition? Priming from sentence context is the amount of priming contribute over and above that of the associative effects of individual's words and sentence. Schubert and Amos, 1977, were the first to appear to demonstrate sentence context effect on visual word recognitions. They present incomplete context sentence followed by a word or non-word to which participants had to make a lexical decisions. Schiller and Bloom, 1979, is a paradigm similar to that of Schubert and Amos. They show that facilitation only occurs if the target word is a highly probable continuation of the sentence. For example, consider the sentence, "She cleaned the dirt from her hair." The word shoes is a highly predictable continuation here. The word hands is an unlikely but non-anomalous continuation. Terms would clearly be an anomalous ending. So we find that an appropriate context has facilitatory effect on highly predictable congruent word shoes relative to congruent word shoes relative to congruent word but unlikely word hands, as there is no direct associative relation between shoes and other word in sentence. This seems to be attributable to priming from sentence context. Stanovic and Wells, 1979 to 1981, see also Wells and Stanovic, 1982, found that contextual effects are larger for words that are harder to recognize than isolations. Contextual facilitation was much larger when the targets were degraded by reduced contrast. In clear conditions, we find mainly contextual facilitation of likely words and conditions of target degradation we find contextual inhibition of anomalous word. Examples are children who of course are less skilled at reading words in isolation from adults also displays more contextual inhibition. Next, West and Stanovic, 1982, argue that the facilitation effects found in the naming task arise through simple associative priming from preceding words in the sentence. It is very difficult to construct test materials that eliminate all associative priming from the other words in the sentence to target. If this explanation is correct, any facilitations found in simply result of associative priming from other words and sentence. Van Petten, 1993, examine event-related potentials. ERPs, a semantically anomalous sentence. One advantage of the ERP technique is that it enables the time course of word recognition to be examined before an overt response such as uttering a word or pressing a button is made. So Van Patten concluded that there was indeed an effect of sentence context that could not be attributed to lexical priming. Next, Kutas, 1993, found that lexical and sentence context had very similar effect on ERPs, but gave rise to N400S, a large negative wave present 400 ms after the stimulus, whose amplitudes vary with the strength of associations or sentence context. Finally, Altarriba, Kroll, Scholl, and Reiner, 1996, examined naming times and eye movements in an experiment where fluent English, Spanish bilinguals read mixed language sentences. They found that sentence context operated both through intralexical priming and high-level priming. Contextual constraints still operate across language, although the results were moderated by lexical variable word frequency. Clearly, the results are variable and seem to be task-dependent. It is possible that processing in discourse is different from the processing of word lists such as typically used in semantic priming experiments. Hess, Foss and Carroll 1995 manipulate global and local context in a task where participants heard discourse over headphones and then had to name the concluding target word which appeared on a screen in front of them. The most important conditions were where the target word was globally related to the context but locally unrelated to the immediately preceding words. 3. And globally unrelated but locally related. The computer science major met a woman who Hess was very fond of. He admired her for a while but wasn't sure how to express himself. He always got nervous when trying to express himself verbally so that the computer science major wrote the poem. The English major was taking a computer science class that she was struggling with. There was a big project that was due at the end of the semester she had thought of doing. Finally, last week and the English major wrote the poem. So Hess found that only global context facilitate naming the target word poem. So this result does not shows the automatic semantic priming does not occur. We certainly observe it with isolated items presented rapidly together. The experiment does not shows in real discourse the effects of global context may be more important. In summary, sentence context can have either an early perceptual effect or a late post-perceptual effect. We can observe early effects but only in a certain task, particularly ones that resemble reading of whole sentence and discourse rather than responding to isolated words. So the summary of meaning-based priming studies. So we can distinguish between associative semantic priming, associative non-semantic priming, and non-associative semantic priming. All sorts of priming have both automatic and attentional components, although there has been considerable debate as to the status of automatic non-associative semantic priming. Next, we move on to the processing morphologically complex words. So far, we have mainly looked at morphologically simple words. How are morphologically complex words stored in the lexicon? Is there a full listing of all derivations of word so that there are entries for kisses, and kissing? We call this the full listing hypothesis. Or do we just list them, kiss, and produce or decode inflected items by applying a rule you added to the stem of a word to form the past tense? As English contains a large number of irregular derivations, for example, run, ape, mice, sheep, we would then have to list the exceptions separately, so we would store a general rule and a list of exemptions. We call this the obligatory decomposition hypothesis. According to the obligatory decomposition hypothesis, to recognize a morphologically complex word, we must first strip off its affix, a process known as affix stripping. Taft and Forster's 1975, see also Taft's 1985 to 1987. Affix stripping. What is affix stripping? It is a technique used in natural language processing and computational linguistics to identify the base form of word by removing its affixes. It's a crucial step in tasks like stemming and lemmatization, which aim to reduce words to the root forms for better analysis and comparison. So in a lexical decision task, words that look as though they have prefix but in fact do not, example, interest and result, take longer to recognize than control words. It is as though participants are trying to strip these words of their affixes but are then unable to find a match in the lexicon and have to reanalyze. In a task where participants were asked to judge whether a visually present word was pronounced identically to other word, example, the word was a homophone. Taft 1984 observed people have difficulty with words such as fine that have a morphological structure different from their homophonic partner her-fine. Compound words, whose meanings are not transparent from their components, example, buttercup, will also be stored separately. Sandra 1990. Hence neither milk nor spoon will facilitate the recognition of buttercup. Next, Marceline Wilson, Tyler Wachsler, and Alder 1994 examine how we process derivationally complex words in English. Marceline Wilson is a cross-modal lexicon decision to examine what we. Example, a participant would have a spoken prime, happiness, and then immediately have to make lexical decisions to visual probe, happy. So the cross-modal nature of the task is important because it obliterates any possible phonological priming between similar words. So the cross-modal nature of the task is important because it obliterates any possible phonological priming between similar words. Next, the pattern of result was complicated and showed that the extent of priming found depends on the ideas of phonological transparency and semantic transparency. So the relation between two morphologically related words is said to be phonologically transparent if their parts sound same. Hence, the relation in friendly and friendship is phonologically transparent. Friend sounds the same in each word, but in sign and signal, it is not. The sign components have different pronunciations. Phonological transparency is really a continuum rather than a dichotomy, with some words pairs such as pirate and piracy in between the extremes. A morphologically complex word is semantically transparent if its meaning is obvious from its parts. Hence, unhappiness is semantically transparent, being made up in predictable fashions from un, happy, and ness. A word like department, even though it contains recognizable morphemes, is not semantically transparent. The meaning of depart and department is not. So semantic and phonological transparency affect the way in which words are identified. Next, semantically transparent forms are morphologically decomposed, regardless of whether or not they are phonologically transparent. Semantically opaque words. So, semantic and phonological transparency affect the way in which words are identified. Suffix and prefix derive words from each other, but pairs of suffix words produce interference. This is because when we have a suffix word, we hear the step first. The experiment of Marceline Wilson shows that in English there is a level of lexical representations that is modality independent because we observe cross-modal priming, and that is morphologically structured for semantically transparent words. This is because of the pattern of facilitates shown.
Models of visual word recognition. For some time, it was thought that there was clear evidences that longer words take longer to pronounce. Foster and Chambers, 1973, Wikis 1997 found that word length measured in letters had little effect on naming words when other properties of words, such as number of words similar to the target words, were controlled for. Although length and some effect of reading non-words, it seems that the number of letters in word has little effect for short words. Furthermore, word length effect in naming words with similar pronunciation pronounced for shorter words. There are two types of model visual word recognition. The first is to demonstrate the meaning influences visual word recognition. The second is to provide a synthesis of ways in which meaning influences the processes of word recognition, in the order of that we might have a better understanding of the dimension of meaning that are assessed in lexical processing. For example of models visual word recognition is some patients who show a deficit in recognizing printed words can nonetheless recognize spoken words, whereas other patients show the reverse situation. Coping with lexical ambiguity. Lexical ambiguity refers to the fact that the ambiguity comes from the word itself. Rather the context, lexical ambiguity occurs in language when someone uses word that has an unclear meaning. A term or a statement is ambiguous when there is more than one potential interpretation of it. Lexical ambiguity can also be called semantic ambiguity. A semantic is a term used to describe the literal meaning that word processes. Generally, the meaning that was intended can be determined based on the rest of the sentence or the general topic of conversation. But sometimes, it is necessary to clarify exactly what was meant by an ambiguous word. Example of lexical ambiguity is it identify cases where area word can include various alternative meanings, and therefore a sentence that uses that word might be confusing because people aren't sure which way to interpret of it. Summary. In summary, sentence context can have either an early perceptual effect or a late post-perceptual effect. We can observe early effect but only in certain tasks, particularly ones that resemble reading of whole sentences and discourse rather than responding to isolated words. We can distinguish between associative semantic priming, associative non-semantic priming, and non-associative priming. All sorts of priming have both automatic and attentional components, although there has been considerable debate as to the status of automatic non-associative semantic priming. The example of summary is a summary is a brief statement or restatement of a main point, especially as a conclusion to a work.